Dawn Summers, and welcome back to my fashion studio. Today we're going to do our first level sewing project that I give my students. And we're going to make a simple baby blanket. And the fabric that you want to use is 100% cotton. That is the best choice. Sometimes students use flannel, sometimes they use something that's kind of silky and it moves all over and they really get frustrated. So if you just use 100% cotton, it still makes a really nice blanket. So if you can see here, I already have my piece cut. It's actually 2 layers. I have 2 different fabrics that blend very well together. So my front and my back are going to be different. I have them, and I'll take my pin out and show you. I already have them right sides together. The size doesn't matter quite as much, but this one is probably about 30 by about 36 inches or so. But like I said, the size isn't what's important as it is getting the skills of sewing straight and pivoting corners and turning and stitching. So that's what we're concentrating on with this project. So if you look, what we're going to do, we're going to start by just simple sewing the pieces together. And in the industry, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance is what is normally used. And I would normally use that on this blanket, but today we're going to use 1/2 inch. And that is to give us a little bit more layering inside for when we do top stitching at the end. So I've already marked on my material. You can see I have a starting point here. I'm going to start at my 1/2 inch in, and I'm going to start and I'm going to stitch all the way down and pivot at the corner and go all the way around, and I'm going to stop about 5 inches and leave an opening, which is where we will turn it. So if you come over with me, we'll get to sewing this. So I'm going to put this up here on my machine at my 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to start at my mark, and we are going to sew on about a 2.5 inch or 2.5 stitch length, which we've already learned in our tutorial. And we are going just to get started and go around this blanket. Give it a quick back stitch because we don't want that to tear out when we flip the blanket. That locked under there. The extra string. Here he goes. All right, now we're rolling. So as straight as you can, following that 1/2 inch seam allowance mark. And once we get to the corner, I even have it marked here where I'm going to put my needle down and pivot to the 1/2 inch. And when you're just beginning, I recommend using pins. That will help keep your fabric in line. All right, we're coming up to the stopping point that I've already marked. And I'm gonna slow down and I'm gonna back stitch and lock it in. So when we turn it, it's not going to rip out on us. So I'm just going to clip those threads really quick and we'll get her turned. And here we are, we've stitched at a 1/2 inch seam allowance and we're almost ready to turn it, but first we have to clip our corners. So all 4 corners, we're going to come over here to the edge and we're going to take our scissors and we're going to diagonally clip close to the corner, but not in the thread. And then because I have a 1/2 inch, I'm going to give it a little extra trim so that I don't have any fabric in the corner. So I'm going to trim the corner so it looks like that, and I'm going to do all 4 corners. One more. Just be careful not to cut into the stitching. You will not be happy. All right, now that all those are trimmed, I'm going to reach in the space that I left open and I'm going to go for the corner and grab as close up in the corner as I can and just slowly start pulling it through. Go in and grab the other corner. Just be very gentle so you don't rip the material. Takes a little bit to work it. You could even leave your opening a little wider. The more open it is, the more hand stitching that you will do in the end, but that's okay. Almost got it. There we go. So as you can see, we got to do a little bit of work to get them out the rest of the way, but overall, there's our blanket. And the next step is probably one of the most important steps. There's the other side. Is we're going to go over and press it, and you have to get these seams pressed completely flat. The mistake that a lot of people do is they just start pressing it, and if I pressed it just like that right now, see how much of a lip there is? We got to get that seam allowance clear to the edge. So we're going to come over here to the ironing board, and I'm going to show you some tricks to get that flat. So the first thing I do is I'm going to push the corners out. So I'm going to take my scissors, they're not super pointy, and I'm going to reach in to the corner and start pushing the corner out. So we want a really square corner. And kind of work it a little bit, and you can feel that there's not a lot of fabric in the corner. That's because we trimmed it so well. And you just need to do that to all four corners. Come in the corner and poke it. There we go. And then I kind of run the scissors along that seam to get it flat up in the corner. And then head to another corner. I can get it in there flat. This one is kind of bunched up. Here we go. See how it can just poke it there and run the scissors along the edge. There we go. And one more corner. Nice and square. Okay, so we're done with the corners. Now to go around this setup here, and remember the idea is to get that good and flat. So what I'm going to do is going to take my little ruler and I'm going to just push it along the edge, and that will get that seam flat. Move it just a little bit here down. So you can see, just have to work it just a little bit. Okay. Kind of an awkward angle here. There we go. Take my ruler. And once again, I'm going to run it up there along the edge. So we're getting that seam right in the middle. Right on the edge. We don't want a lip on it. Now you just do the same and work it all the way around the blanket. Okay, here's our opening. You can see it's probably about 4 inches, and we need to tuck all of that under just like it was a seam. Make it all smooth there. right back around to the beginning. So there, the whole blanket is pressed flat. Now we get to do some hand stitches. So join me. We're going to sew this closed with a slip stitch. I already have my needle and my thread put together. I'm just going to use white. And there's another tutorial that you can watch that is detailed and close up for a slip stitch. But really what I'm going to do is I'm going to start underneath in the corner, if I can get a hold of it here, and tuck my tail underneath, tucked in there. And I'm going to start grabbing this side and tucking it through. This is a slip stitch, which hides it very well. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the gray side and then come in the allowance of the fold there, the other side, and grab the gray side, so I can grab the gray side and tuck in and go in about 1/4 inch underneath on the floral side. Grab the gray, tuck in, grab the gray, go. It's a little harder to see. The tutorial shows you with an alternating color, which helps to see it better. We are almost getting there. Some options instead of the slip stitch is you can do a little whip stitch. And I might show you here, the whip stitch is just taking a little piece from the gray side and a little piece from the floral side, and you just go loop it back and forth. That closes it as well. So what I'm doing now is a whip stitch, which is also in a tutorial. Grab a little bit from each side. It's not as pretty because you can actually see the thread a little bit more than you can in the slip stitch. But it goes, this is the whip stitch, and it goes a little faster. So you can see both options. One other option is you can do an edge stitch on your machine, which means you put the material right on the edge of your fabric and do a little stitch to close it up. So all those are 3 options for you. And you can choose what you prefer. And I think we're to the end here. We'll do one more little piece. We'll do a little knot. I always go through it twice. And then I bring my needle inside and hide the end. And then I give it a little clip. So if you want to look, you can see what the two look like. So the slip stitch hides the stitches, and the whip stitch you can kind of see, but you're not going to really notice this on this blanket unless you look really, really close. So I prefer the look of the slip stitch or the edge stitch on the machine to the whip stitch, but those are all options until you get good. Now the final step is we are going to do a decorative stitch all the way around the edge, and I'm going to stitch it at probably about 3/8 from the edge. And the reason that we did a 1/2 inch seam allowance is when you feel this material, you can feel the seam allowance ends about right here. So when I do that stitch, it's going to give it a platform of stability to go all the way around and not get kind of wavy. I'm going to use, instead of a decorative stitch, I'm just going to use my zigzag because I really like the way it looks. And it also gives us a little bit of dimension to it. I'm going to switch my thread to pink. So we'll be right back and we'll be ready to do the decorative stitch. Welcome back. We're getting ready to do the edge stitch, and I've been doing a little bit of practicing, and I'm going to do a simple zigzag. So I have my machine set to the certain width and length of the zigzag that I want to use, and I've chosen a light pink, and I'm going to go ahead and start and do it on the face of the gray. And since I'm all set up, I'm just going to go all the way around the edge. I'm going to start near the corner, so it's kind of out of sight, but I don't want the exact corner. My seam allowance is giving me about a ½ inch, so I'm going to stitch on about 3/8 of an inch. So we're just going to take our time and just go clear around the blanket. We're almost back around. We're just going to go over the stitches where we started, do a quick little back stitch, clip our threads, and it's done. So there's your stitching. I'm going to give it a good hard press here when I get finished. When we look at it, and there's the gray side, and then there's the back side of the floral. So a fun little project. A few variations that I'm going to tell you about really quick that you can do if you want to add a little bit of decoration to it. I have a blanket here that I had a student do, that she made her blanket and wanted to do a little extra. So I don't know if you can see here in the center, we took a heart template and we marked it on the material with our invisible, our marker that disappears with heat. And then she found a decorative stitch, the same stitch that she used to go around the edge of her blanket. And she literally just kept curving around and following the stitch line, or the line, as she stitched. So that put a fun little heart in the middle of this fabric, or this blanket. Another interesting little decoration is, this is a blanket that was made with some flannel, but my daughter made this years ago, and she used a different decorative stitch on each side. Kind of put them up here so you can see the different sides. So this one, and then over here on this side did this stitch. So you can see the 4 different stitches. Also, at about 6 inches in from the edge of each side, you can see where she embroidered her name. So she has her first name and her middle name on this side, and her last name on the final side. And then clear around the 4th corner, she has monogrammed her initials. So that's a fun little addition that you can do if you want to do more for an exciting project. Anyway, what a great learning project for a first piece to do. Lots of little stitches, learning straight stitches, learning to use your iron, turning fabric, top stitching, a little bit of hand stitching. Great project. So until next time, keep imagining what you want to learn and create it. Thank you.